Hi, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Michael Giacchino, the Oscar-winning composer from such things as as I told you before, scoring my children's childhood with Up and Ratatouille, and of course other things like Star Trek, and now with Netflix's Society of the Snow. Michael, very excited to sit down and talk with you.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So I want to start with a little bit of a generic question. First of all, I love the score for Society of the Snow. It feels very different than anything you've done before, and we'll dive into that, of course.
Mhm.
But in terms of like I said, a generic question, how do you approach composition? What is the first thing that you tend to do when you're looking at scoring something? Regardless, let's not talk about the genre at this point, but just when
Yeah.
in general, how do you
I think
approach?
for me, I mean, since I come from like a filmmaking background and, I grew up making movies and it's all I've ever done. And I went to film school. When I sit down with a movie for the first time to write music for it, the only thing I care about is just how does it make me feel?
Right.
That's it. That's the only thing I care about. Like, I really, really just want to understand and dive deep into how the experience affected me emotionally. So when I'm watching something, I'm not thinking, oh, music here, music there, or
Right.
violins and timpanis. I'm honestly just taking it in, and then once I finish watching the movie for the first time, I like to sit and just sort of process what it was, because out of that processing, that's where the music's going to come from. Um, and I usually will sit down at a piano after that and try and find the notes that sort of reflect how I felt while watching it. So it's a very kind of crazy process. It's not such an ABC type thing. It's really just sitting down and then finding the emotions that match what I felt when I watched it. So and in doing so, for me anyways, it's a way that I can try and be faithful and truthful in the telling of the story, so that, because music is such a dangerous thing in a movie, it can completely derail what the movie needs to survive and to communicate what it wants to be to the audience. So if I'm not in line with what the movie truly is, then my music is going to tell some different story than the movie is. So it's I always want to start there. I try to emotionally just ground myself with the characters.
That makes sense. And, you know, as I mentioned, I would just flew back from Los Angeles. And ironically, not knowing I was going to talk to you today, I had watched Star Trek,
Ah,
the J.J. Abrams Star Trek,
yes,
and started Khan, didn't finish Khan, well, Into Darkness. And I have to say that Star Trek has one of my almost all-time favorite pieces of yours, Enterprising Young Man, as I think as I
enterprising
call
young
it.
man. Yes, yeah,
I listened to that. It's so insane. So regardless of the genre, that's still how you would approach it. You still watch
absolutely,
Star
yeah.
Trek.
Even
Yeah.
yes, especially and I feel like it's even in some ways it's more important for a film like Star Trek or Ratatouille, or because people have a tendency to sort of, especially with animated films, people will say to me all the time, like, what, oh, it must be much easier working on an animated film, or that must be very different from a live action film. And I'm always of the mind that no, it's actually they're exactly the same in terms of process for me. I treat, Remy, that rat, as with the same amount of respect I would treat Captain Kirk, played by Chris Pine. I want them all to feel like real people. So I really try to put myself in their shoes. And so I will just sit there and go, okay, what is Remy really going through? What is it that he's actually feeling in that moment? And that's what I dig for. I try to find that, and then try to find the music that feels like that. So it's and then of course if you do like something like Society of the Snow, it's something that actually happened. At least with Star Trek, I can live in this fantasy world while I'm writing, and I can imagine being in their shoes, but it's not
Mhm.
necessarily something that anyone really ever did. Whereas with Society of the Snow, I was suddenly dealing in a very different mind space, where not only was I trying to understand what the characters were going through, but then you really are living with the fact that people went through this experience.
Right.
And I actually met the people that went through this experience. And it really was quite a different journey for me on this film with the process that I generally use in order to write scores for films. And so I found myself all day long in these sort of very dark places, as I'm working on the film. And I think, end the day of writing and just feel sad. You would just feel depressed because you're really taking on all of this in order to do the work. So it was quite a different experience for me working on that. But process wise, across the board, it's generally the same.
So, how did you get involved initially into Society of the Snow and working with Jay Bayona?
Well, he and I have known each other for a very long time. We met,
Okay.
I don't know, 14 years ago or so, and in Spain at a film music festival.
Mm.
And it was one of those situations. I didn't know who he was, and he was there because he's a film score fan. And I was at this event, and he was sitting at a table, and my girlfriend said to me, she goes, "Hey, that guy over there sitting at the table, he's got a Superman watch on." She goes, "You should go talk to him. You like Superman." She was like a mom, trying to have a kid make friends at the park. Look, he's got the same T-shirt as you. Go make friends. So I was like, oh, okay. So I went over and walked. I said, hey, I introduced myself. He introduced himself, and I said, that's a very cool watch. And we started talking about Superman, and we both had a huge love of movies. Clearly, we both love Richard Donner and all the work he's done, especially Superman. And we ended up staying up to like 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
that night, talking just movies and music. And we became great friends, starting with that night. And so over the years, he and I, anytime he's in town, I would see him. Anytime I was there, I'd see, we'd get together and we'd talk movies and all of that. And he would bring his movies to me as he was making them, and he would show them to me, and I would just give my thoughts. Here's my thoughts on the score. Here's my thoughts on the editorial story, all of that stuff. And it was just sort of what artists do with each other when they're sharing work before they're about to finish it, that panic stage. And so when he came here, then we eventually did work together on Jurassic World. He got
Right.
hired on Jurassic World, and I was like, do it. That would be so much fun. We had a great experience together. Um, and then he brought this movie to me in March, I guess it was, or right around the day of the writer's strike that began. And so I was preparing to begin work on this movie that I was directing for Warner Brothers. And what happened was that day, he brought the movie to me. He was like, I just want to show it to you, get your thoughts. What do you think? And we started talking I saw it. I was completely in love with it. I was floored by it, and I was emotional wreck afterwards. And I was wrestling with this. I couldn't tell if he was asking me to score the movie or wasn't, or just wanted my comments. But when the news came through that the writer's strike happened, he looked at me, and we were sitting in my house together. And when the news came in, and he's like, well, there's a strike now, so you can't really work on your movie. He's like, so what do you think? Do you want to score this movie? And I was like, yes, I will absolutely be honored to score this movie. And I was also at the same time terrified to score the movie because I knew what it meant for me, that I was going to have to go through emotionally to sort of dig in and get what I needed to do. But it was a story that I've known since I was a child. I mean, it's such a far-reaching story that even me growing up in New Jersey where I knew about this. My sister still has, she went back to her old diaries from the 70s, and she pulled out, and she had a whole paragraph in there about the fact that this had happened. She was writing about it. So it was something that we all knew about. So to kind of engage in it in this way it felt very, I was very honored. It felt very special to be able to be a part of it. So, but it wasn't the normal way of sort of getting involved in a film, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does seem like this is a deeply, the way you talk about it, the way you've referenced it in other media. It does seem like it's a deeply personal project for you. Why do you connect so much with this story?
You know, it's so interesting. I think we all imagine what we would do in certain situations, and we all imagine the kind of person we would like to be in any particular uh, challenging moment. And this is a movie that truly asks that question of you, not just sort of who are you. It's like who can you be? Who do you want to be? You know, and more than many movies I have seen over the years, this one really asks that question in a way in which you can't just turn your back on it. It you know, because to do that would to admit that you don't have a soul. I think you know,
Right.
and he has such a beautiful way of dealing with emotions. That's why I love his movies so much. He's not afraid to shy away from the fact that, you know, he's going to tell you how he feels. You know, Juan Antonio is so, he can be so emotional and so wear his heart on a sleeve in a really good way. So I loved that the film was challenging me in that sense, you know. So, and as you get into it, the other thing that really just hit home with me was when I met, you know, the survivors. I was able to meet a few of them, and it was and spend time with them, and that was incredible. You know, to understand we can only look at this from the outside. We can
Right.
really only look at this from the outside. When you sit there with someone who went through it, you feel this ultimate responsibility. I knew I was telling their story and I did not want to mess that up. You know, I wanted them to be able to watch it and feel like, yes, that's my story, you know? So it was like tiptoeing the whole way through, you know, to make sure that, you know, and it's all subjective and it's really probably a lot of it is self imposed on myself. But I don't know, it was just such an interesting experience to go through, one unlike any other film that I had worked on.
To paraphrase something that you said earlier, which is basically that music can, music can disrupt the flow of a film. Music can yeah, I don't want to say ruin a film, but
Yeah.
it can
Oh, again.
change. Yeah.
Mhm.
So as I watch Society of the Snow, one thing that is very apparent is there are lots of stretches where there isn't score,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
You know, I always think working in film, everyone is always so focused on the decision, where do we put music?
mhm,
And I almost come at it from an opposite point of view. Where do we not need music?
mhm,
And let's protect those spaces, because when you have a an area left open to just breathe and just be real, when the music does come in eventually, it will be that much more meaningful.
mhm,
Whereas if you have music just playing through the whole thing, eventually you become numb to it. It's like someone standing next to you and telling you the same joke for 8 hours. You're like, I get it. I don't need you to keep telling me this joke or keep reminding me that this is a terrible situation these people are in, or to keep, you know, I know that. So it's about trusting the audience and allowing the actors to do their thing. There are times when an actor will just give a look and that's all you need. You don't need anything else. Or the sound design will be so perfect. The sound of the environment that these people are in is so perfect. That's doing exactly what you need it to do. You don't need to add music on top of it all the time. So it's always great to work on a film where space is honored as much as the places that you choose to put music.
right, right.
And it's not always the case.
One of the things that is talked about so much with this film is the authenticity of it. The inclusive casting of Uruguayan actors
Yeah.
to basically not give us Alive from 1992,
Yeah.
um, which is a fine film, but it's not is
Yeah. They're,
wildly
they're very
different
different
versions.
films. It feels
Right.
like I feel like one focused on the event and one focused on the the people, and
Right.
specifically the people that didn't make it, as opposed to the people that are the heroes and survive the thing. So yeah, two different approaches for sure.
When you were composing the score, then I mean, did you look at instrumentation that would kind of echo that authenticity and that inclusion?
Yeah. Well, I want it to feel like the music was the spirit of Uruguay, you know, and I wanted to make sure that it was mixed with the spirit of the Andes. So there is this language that we use in the choir that is called Mapuche, which is from the Andes, and it's an indigenous language from that area. And then the percussion and some of the guitar stuff and some of the other odd sounds like are really made out of instruments from that region, you know. So it was really, you know, and it's not something that I think anyone would inherently recognize right off the bat, the average person, but it does help put you in a place and in a mood subconsciously. So I wanted more than anything the music, especially that choir, to be the voice of the people that didn't get to come down off that mountain, because there were plenty that didn't, and they had never really been given a voice. It was always the survivors, and for me, the music was the voice of those who didn't survive, didn't make it.
That's amazing. I first heard the score at the Middleburg Film Festival, where you received a what was it, a career recognition award, career
Yeah.
achievement, something like that.
Hmm.
And it was an incredibly moving experience. And you do have, you know, we had the choir
Yeah.
at that performance. Do you normally work with choirs a lot?
It depends on the film. You know, there's choir in Star Trek. There's choir in John Carter. It depends on the film. You know, sometimes you really want that to help give that epic feel to the especially on those fantasy films. It can really add something to it. Um, but I guess it's about, I don't know, 30% of the movies I've worked on have had it. It's always fun to do. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom actually had it, so that was
Right.
fun to do some really gothic horror stuff with him on that. So it really, again, it depends on the film, but this film felt like, oh, that human, truly human element of a voice
Mhm.
that felt more important than any other film I've done for this.
The reaction there at Middleburg. I mean, I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. And I'm not just talking about from when you did Up,
Mhm.
Married Life from Up, but you know, the Society of the Snow component was incredibly emotional. How has the reaction to your score affected you, to hear all the the people singing praises of it?
It's nice. It's always nice when they like what you do. That's far better than the alternative. But what I really like about it is it feels like, and I'm hearing from a lot of friends across, you know, getting texts from people and things as they start to see it, as it's now on Netflix, and it feels like it's moving them in a very specific, special way, unlike a lot of other things. So the fact that people are having that experience, that means a lot to me. I love that, and it means that it's like they're communing with the spirit of the movie in a way, and as opposed to just saying, hey, I watched that and that was a blast, and you know, this is not that movie. This is a movie that, you know, some people may only watch once because it's a very difficult movie, but it's a if only watched once, it'll probably still stay with you forever. It's that indelible.
It absolutely will. And you know, I of course I obviously watched it, and I had to force myself to watch it. I mean, because I knew the subject matter,
Yeah.
and I wasn't ready to take it on. But I will
Yep.
say, after the events start to happen, it's handled so delicately, and it's not gratuitous at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because it's about what's inside, really. You know, it's a more philosophical approach. And it's a chance to hear a story from the point of view of someone who didn't make it. And that's pretty amazing, you know. So that trumps everything else. That covers, you know, that I think that's the thing that makes it special, is the point of view of this movie is so unique.
Yeah. So, last question for you. I want to dive a little bit into your directorial
Yeah,
tasks, your
sure.
challenges, because I know in Middleburg you presented a Super 8 film of what you made as a kid, and then you branched off obviously into composition. And I have
Mhm.
long considered you the heir apparent to John Williams. I mean, I love your scores that much.
Oh,
Um, but
I love his scores.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I was so excited the other day because he said, "I'm not done yet. I've got more work in me."
Yes, of course. I truly believe John will continue to write until he's physically unable to do it anymore. Like, he's one of those. people, one of those geniuses that will just keep writing, because that's what he's compelled to do that, and I love that.
Every time I get a new one out from him, I'm like, "Is this the last one?" And I'm like, "Oh," I get so emotional listening to it because I'm gonna be a basket case the day that. Anyway,
Well, let's hope it
um,
never happens. Let's
let's
hope
hope
it
it
just
never
sticks around
happens.
forever. Why not?
But Werewolf by Night, you directed that, the Marvel
Yes.
project for Disney Plus last year, I believe.
Yes.
And you said you were working on something else. What is that new
Yeah,
project?
and I'm working on a film for Warner Brothers right now called Them,
Oh,
which
okay.
is loosely based on the original 1950s movie Them, about the giant ants that were sort of propagated due to our forays into nuclear uh, power. So it's a really interesting follow up to that idea, and and I'm having a blast working on that right now. So that's the next thing up, and there are other things in various stages of you know go, I guess. And but that's the one I'm focusing on the most right now, which is really exciting, a lot of fun, because it was always one of my favorite films growing up.
Yeah, and it feels like a great thing to kind of revisit the nuclear terror films of the
Yeah,
50s.
I think, when you think about us as human beings and how we handle innovation, we're not real good at it. Whenever we come across a new frontier like nuclear energy or gene editing or AI. Every time we're so great at like busting open the doors on these things, but we're not real good at closing the doors on these things and tidying up afterwards. We tend to, as a race, I think, or as a species, we tend to uh, lose interest and move on to the next crazy shiny thing,
Right.
leaving a trail of sort of destruction behind us that isn't quite finished yet. So I don't know. There's something very Rod Serling and Twilight Zone about that I am fascinated by in terms of humans and how they act. So that to me is a fun thing to explore.
I can't wait to see it. Michael Giacchino, thank you so much for the time. Congratulations on the score and best of luck to you in the season ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. Happy to be here.